It was 1990. I'm not a congressman. Albania still is controlled by a psychotic leader who wanted to impose, like North Korea today, the worst communism in Europe, Stalinistic, atheistic. In fact, for 45 years, every church was burned, every synagogue, every mosque, priests were shot in the street, kids were turned against parents. Oh, tell me, did your father say the rosary, make the sign of the cross? Next day they picked him up, threw him in a gulag. You have no idea what the Albanian people had to live through for 45 years. In 1990, the Berlin Wall had come down. That was October 1989, and my good friend, a wonderful Jewish congressman, I'm a Republican, he was a Democrat, but when you do good things in life, parties don't matter. I became part of the Congressional Human Rights Caucus. So Tom Lantos, and you may remember, Tom Lantos was the one saved by Raoul Wallenberg. He's the only congressman that got saved from the Holocaust. He's born in Hungary. So when I went to him with this issue, Tom, I got the story from the Albanian people about Kosovo, but nobody here seems to know Kosovo. He says, Joe, I know Kosovo. I was born in Hungary, and I will help you on this issue. And he did, through my congressional thing. But 1990, I'm invited now to come to Albania. Nobody for 45 years could go in, and nobody could come out. If you tried to get in, you were shot. If you tried to come out, you were shot. That's how bad this state was. And but Lantos had told me, Joe, I've traveled the world. I know the Albanian people. I've helped you. If you go, I want to go with you. But when the head of the Communist Party in Albania realized that Tom Lantos was the head of the Congressional Human Rights Caucus, imagine this state and human rights, didn't exist. He, Ramez Aliyah, to patronize this Jewish congressman, takes a file out of the communist archives, like this thick, 3 inches, gives it to him. And Lantos gave it to me, and I'm going through this file, and I notice it's in different languages. Some have clippings, some are letters, some are pictures. And I realized that these are people, and the dates on the letters were from 1945 up until maybe 20 years after that, the ones that I saw. And guess what this was? This was the file of the Jews that were rescued, trying to reach their rescuers. The communists wouldn't let the letters go through, but they kept them in the archives. I immediately, with my connections with Israel, sent it to Yad Vashem. I had it hand-delivered, and they couldn't believe it. They couldn't believe that so many people were rescued by Albanians, and nobody knew the story. So in 1990, there were no righteous among Gentiles for Albanians. We're up to 69. But you know what? Every Jew in Albania was saved, and there was 400 families, and some of them came from the burning of the Second Temple. Some of them even before. They were called Romanians. These were the women who were taken as slaves from Judea. The tribe of the Kohanim. Ships would shipwreck on the shores, not in Rome or in Italy. The wind would blow towards Albania, and those women kept their faith. They were Albanians. When I went there, they would show me. One person said my grandmother was Albanian, and he had a mezuzah underneath his shirt to keep faith with what he thought was his roots. So here, not only did they save 400 families that are now, most of them in Tel Aviv, because Mr. Sana, a wealthy Jewish philanthropist, who helped me, and he wrote this book based on the story, he paid for every family after communism went down in 1992 that wanted to repatriate to Tel Aviv to go there. So not only did they save the 400, but when the Jews realized that the Albanians had this culture called Besa, and it's in an article that you're going to get tonight, my wife wrote, Jewish Survival in Albania, the Ethics of Besa. That word Besa is part of the Albanian tradition or canon. It goes back thousands of years to when they were Illyrians. Albanians are the only indigenous people in the Balkans. They go back to the Illyrian tribes. But the Besa is an honor code that says that if you're a guest in my family, and the same applies if you're in my country, then my family is so dishonored if you are injured. God forbid you're killed, that I would have to die before you're injured. When the Jews in Yugoslavia found out about this, they were coming over the border any which way they could, and another 2,500 Jews were saved by the Albanians. What this book tells is a story that no Jew, not one, was given up to the Nazis by the Albanians. It became a collective resistance. In fact, Mordecai Patiel at Yad Vashem wrote a little story about this and said, not only did they save Jews, they were competing with each other, family to family, to save the Jews, because it was such an honor to do this in their tradition. The other thing I want to leave with you is that you have to reflect on this, because it's hard to understand human nature when you think about going into Yad Vashem, and I've been there a number of times, and even here in Washington, and you see that the perpetrators of the Holocaust were people with PhDs, people who went to church, people who were educated, and the people who saved the Jews were the poorest people in Europe. It's kind of like an anomaly of life that this could happen, that people with such education, some of them with PhDs and medical doctors, could perpetrate one of humanity's worst crimes, the Holocaust. Nothing can compare to it. And yet you had some of the poorest people at the risk of their lives. Because the communists, you know, it was a zero-sum tolerance game. They only wanted one thing, the party, the Communist Party, nothing else. So they risked their lives to save the Jews.